Here's something you've probably noticed. In the US, there are about 350 million people, and yet we're somehow stuck with only 2 political parties. And despite the fancy names, neither of them are much fun at all. This split means that instead of hearing nuanced policy discussions, you just end up choosing who you hate the least, or picking 1 or 2 things you really don't want messed with, and then compromising anyway. Most people don't get too deep into political theory, but we've all heard terms like left and right. Maybe you remember some diagram from civics class with radicals versus reactionaries, social reform versus conservatism. But let's be honest, for most of us, these terms don't actually mean much. In reality, when someone asks if you're left or right in America, they're really just trying to figure out how many pride flag colors you can name. Even the most extreme people on both ends of the political spectrum have more in common than you think. For instance, they both share the same weakness, the follow-up question. Take the far-left crowd. After a few too many cups of coffee and zero research, they'll confidently drop a Ben Shapiro hasn't heard this one before. And on the far right, you'll find someone saying, white people are superior, only to be hit with the obvious follow-up, what's your sample size? But here's the deal. Just saying you're left or right doesn't begin to capture the complexity of someone's political beliefs. For example, a fiscal conservative who thinks government debt is a big issue will be lumped in with people who literally stormed the Capitol. Meanwhile, a liberal who supports nuclear energy as a clean alternative will be painted with the same brush as someone arguing that the real solution to climate change is some heartfelt land acknowledgement. Enter the political compass, the tool that actually gives us some nuance, instead of just slapping left or right on your views. This lets you break down your thoughts on both economic and social policies. And most importantly, it lets you see where your beliefs stand in relation to others. Here's how it works. The higher you go on the compass, the more you lean towards a big government. The further down you go, the more you prefer smaller government. On the left, you favor equal distribution of resources, while on the right, you trust the free market to handle everything. Let's take a look at the different quadrants, starting with the most highly valued one, and see where you fit. Authoritarian right, highest value, virtue. Pros, people get to follow their own ideals. Cons, we decide what those ideals are. Authoritarian left, highest value, equality. Pros, everyone gets an equal share of everything. Cons, we all end up with nothing. Libertarian left, highest value, compassion. Pros, what's mine is yours, and what's yours is mine. Cons, it's hard to love your partner's boyfriend. Libertarian right, highest value, freedom. Pros, the rich get richer. Cons, the poor, not so much. Now, what does this all really mean? Let's break it down in a way that makes sense. Authoritarian right believes in virtue. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Libertarian left is all about being friendly and open-minded, but maybe a little too broke. Libertarian right is temporarily embarrassed millionaires. Authoritarian left wants the world to be perfect, as long as you remove that one tiny flaw. So, how does each quadrant interact with the others? The answer is simple. They think everyone else is the same until you start asking a few real questions. For example, someone on the right might think everyone on the left is the same, but the libertarian left will argue that communism looks amazing in theory, everyone living equally and harmoniously, until it's time to actually execute it. Meanwhile, the authoritarian left will chime in with, yeah, it's a mess, but it's often necessary. Similarly, the left often lumps everyone on the right together, but authoritarian right will say, I get that people are different, but my culture's values are fading and chaos is taking over. The libertarian right just wants everyone to be free and live as they wish, no strings attached. The two sides get each other confused too. Libertarians often mistake authoritarians for being woke, but here's the subtle difference. Libertarian left will treat people with kindness and respect, whereas libertarian right says, hey, if the customer is king, I'm the CEO. Libertarians also don't always get authoritarians. Both like having top-down control, but libertarian right is more straightforward about it. If I don't like what you're doing, I'll hit you with a stick. Authoritarian left, on the other hand, will subtly convince everyone else that you're the one with the stick. And let's not even get started on the ideal versus actual relationships each quadrant would have. Authoritarian right's ideal relationship, a traditional nuclear family, dog, white picket fence, and all that jazz. The reality? A string of failed marriages and a questionable anime profile picture. On the flip side, libertarian left would love an off-grid cottage with an open marriage in the mountains, but that's never going to happen because they lack the funds. Libertarian right, however, would settle for an 85-year-old billionaire with an army of Instagram models on a mega yacht in Dubai. And yeah, they know exactly why the girls like them. It's also about intersections. Here's where the real magic happens. For example, libertarian left cares about the environment, while authoritarian left wants to force you to care too. Centrist left? They're the ones who halfway through their plastic straw protest, decide it's time to just accept the turtles might have to die for them to live comfortably? But the most important question is this: how do you fit in the compass? You may lean toward a particular quadrant, but no single label can capture the full complexity of your beliefs. That's where the third dimension comes in. Technological progressivism versus technological regressivism. Are you into the future of tech, or do you want to go back to the basics? Want to merge with machines or retreat to a simpler time? The point is, labels like left and right don't really do justice to the complexity of people's political beliefs. It's about time we move beyond the simple labels and embraced a more nuanced, multidimensional approach to politics. Because the world's a lot more complicated than just left and right.